that will remain so regardless of who wins this race.
All right, Lindsay Duncombe in Washington, thank you very much. Quick look at the board, the count: 89 for Joe Biden, 72 for Donald Trump. We are about 30 seconds away from the top of the clock, 10 p.m. Eastern. We know that that is a point at which many more polls start to close. And as you start to see some states leaning one way or another, we're not going to call them until we are absolutely certain that those states have gone a particular direction, and it is entirely possible that is days away. So we're heading into 10 o'clock. Have just closed in this unprecedented presidential election. How many times have you heard that over the last 4 years? So let's have a look at these races. States this hour. There aren't many electoral college votes up for grabs, just 21. Montana and Utah likely wins for Trump, but polls show a tight race in Iowa. Okay, so Ian, can you catch us up to what is happening, what's about to happen, and what has just happened?
Yeah, maybe the theme for this hit could be too close to call. And let's begin with Florida. Remember, we saw in Florida Donald Trump kind of pulling away from Joe Biden. Let's take a look at where it is now. Now, you look at that number and you might think to yourself, that's a pretty good margin for Donald Trump, particularly in Florida. I was saying last hour, by Floridian standards, that's kind of a landslide. And yet the people who study these numbers say that is still too close to call. We have 9% of the vote to be counted. And if that 9% reflects heavily one side or the other, then that, in this case, if it reflected heavily votes for Joe Biden, that could change things around. So officially right now, Florida too close to call. When it finally is called, 29 electoral college votes will end up in one of those categories, either for Biden or Trump. Let me show you two states that even you and I pretty well can tell are too close to call. North Carolina, 0.2 of a percentage point. A few years ago, when Barack Obama was first running for president, he won North Carolina, and I'll look up the exact number, but I'm pretty sure it was a tiny margin. Might have been the smallest or second smallest margin in the country, and you can see we may be headed to that again. And one other that is really too close to call at this point is Pennsylvania, with its 20 electoral college votes, and 0.7 of 1 percentage points is all that separates the two of them. But only 25% of the vote counted. And if you've just joined us, we've been warning people that Pennsylvania is a state where the count could continue. It literally could
Yeah,
continue
because
for days. It
Democrats
might not be till
changed
Friday
everything. I
that some
told
of
you.
the
They
counties
want to
have
cheat,
finally
so
done the
they
final
change
count of their
everything.
ballot.
And this is
It
where
used
the
to be the
cautions from
same
earlier
night.
on
You
come
remember?
back in,
It
this
used to
notion of
finish
a
one
mirage,
night.
right? Like there could be a
Democrat
red
changed
mirage
it.
or
They
a
have to
blue mirage
count
that you just have to be
boxes
very,
and
very
boxes
careful.
of votes
And
that come in from
no one's
other
going to be
people.
jumping to any conclusions. I know you want in on
That's
this
why I don't
conversation
want
too.
them to win. They
Pennsylvania
are
in
cheaters.
Yeah, so Pennsylvania is really interesting, not just because of all of the intrigue
No,
and
they're
suspense
cheaters.
built into the race this time around, but
Yeah,
also
why
because
would
it
it
is this
mess
kind
up the
of
election
perfect
like that? That is
prototypical
very
battleground, right?
important.
Where you
Why would
have
it mess up the
almost equal
election?
parts rural, urban, suburban, and this is the state where
Democrats are
you
cheaters.
probably
Lord,
remember,
please
if you've
come
been
and
following the
rescue us
campaign
from
over the
these
last few weeks,
evil
where Trump
people.
infamously said, "Suburban women, please like me." This this is something that both campaigns, I think, understand very intimately, that suburban white women were disproportionately responsible for the victories that Democrats saw in 2018, flipping control of the House. And so we've seen, particularly Trump, I would say, being pretty explicitly clear about his desire to win over that particular
Why?
demographic. There have been some missteps, I would say, over the last little while, certainly ones that white suburban women have been picking up on. One thing, he's referred sometimes to them as suburban housewives, which is admittedly a pretty narrow way to cast that demographic. But he's also been pretty clear that if you vote for Biden, then you might as well kiss your suburbs goodbye, because they will transform under, and that conversation is a bit longer because it goes back to an Obama era rule about affordable housing and zoning. But the point there being that if you look at local Facebook groups of suburban women, moms, parents, housewives, to use a Trump term, there are lots of instances of suburban women sort of openly memeing, mocking the president over this approach. So leading up to this moment, Adrian, I would say it's been hard to try to figure out, okay, in which direction does this war for the suburbs actually go? It's hard to read. I suppose the proof will come later. Maybe not tonight, though.
Eventually, slowly. Okay, so again, the count. 89 Electoral College votes for Joe Biden, 72 for Donald Trump. Hasn't moved much in a while. It might not for a while. We're going to have to be patient. I want to go back to Pennsylvania, though. We can't stop talking about this. Stephen D'Souza is there. And I'm trying to get a handle, Stephen, on perspective on how many mail-in ballots there might be, needed to count.
Well, that's a funny question because some city officials just did a news conference, and I'm pretty sure it's probably the biggest audience they've had for a news conference about the counting of ballots. And reporters pretty much asked in 15 different ways, when are you going to have the results? And they've told us that they've counted about 75,000 mail-in ballots here in the city of Philadelphia, which is the largest county in all of Pennsylvania. And they have about 350,000 mail-in ballots so far, and that's just what they've received up till now. There's still drop boxes that need to come in. There's still others that are being accepted up until Friday. And so, of course, reporters here are trying to do the math. It's like, well, if you did 75,000 over the last 10 hours, does that mean, this many an hour? And they said they can do about 10,000 or 12,000 an hour. But that's if they're running straight through. But they said, it's harder than that because at the beginning of the day, you have to open the envelopes, you have to get people going, and then you have to have shifts, and it gets into all of these very basic things. And so the answer keeps coming back. It's going to take, 2 or 3 days before we get the results here in the city of Philadelphia. And that's a city and a county where they're counting right now these mail-in ballots. There's a lot of counties that said they're not going to start counting them right away. They're going to wait until tomorrow. They're going to prioritize the in-person voting. And so it's one of these things where, we were showing earlier the massive vote counting operation they have here at the convention center. And a lot of pressure is on all the people in there and the city officials too, because you have the President of the United States saying that any mail-in ballots that are counted after Election Day could lead to cheating. It could lead to violence. He criticized the Supreme Court for allowing that to happen, even though it was actually a state Supreme Court decision. So a lot of pressure being faced here, and still a long way coming, Adrian, for those vote counts.
All right.
1 minute,
Everywhere,
sit
which is a great
down.
thing. No matter who wins tonight, turnout is up, which is a great thing, and we hope that continues. You come down here, this is where Beto O'Rourke and others in Texas told the Democrats, you want to win the state? Yes, you have to be competitive in Dallas and Houston. Please come down here.
And we shouldn't forget that. He deserves credit for that, and it appears that he is maybe not getting a lot of black votes, but maybe people haven't turned out tonight, and that in some ways had an impact.
Mary Bruce, what are you hearing from the Biden campaign about this phenomenon right now? Do they believe it?
It's a good question. Tonight they are being tight-lipped on that, of course, but it is interesting when you look at the trajectory of this campaign. Joe Biden is often accused of taking the black vote for granted. A lot of attention was paid, especially several months ago at the beginning of this pandemic. Biden on Charlemagne the God, his radio show, saying to black voters that if they don't vote for him, quote, you ain't black. That, of course, did not sit well with many in the black community, despite the fact that, of course, it was black voters, especially female black voters, that helped in many ways rescue Joe Biden's candidacy, helped deliver him this nomination, especially in the South. And Joe Biden has continued to face this criticism.
Country. And this is our opportunity to leave the dark, angry politics of the past 4 years behind us, to choose hope over fear, unity over division, science over fiction. I believe it's time to unite the country, to come together as a nation. But I can't do it without you. So I'm asking for your vote. We need to remember, this is the United States of America. And there's never been anything we've been unable to do when we've done it together. I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
That are supposed to have video cameras, and none of them record you.
It was sort of exasperating because of snafus, if you will. We didn't have any tapes. We didn't have any solid stuff to show that he was there.
When police looked in Doug's car, they found no blood or any evidence suggesting foul play, and there was no evidence the car had recently been cleaned. But underneath the car, investigators found something trapped in the undercarriage.
There was a significant quantity of this dried plant material, some of it very large pieces, and those were removed and analyzed later. But had this plant material been there for weeks, you certainly wouldn't expect to find such large pieces of it still attached to the undercarriage.
Could these dried weeds tell investigators anything about Jenna's murder?